Why monks outthink Harvard graduates, the focus secret nobody talks about. Harvard graduates have everything. The best professors on earth, billion-dollar research facilities, networks that open every door, a credential that makes recruiters fall over themselves. And yet, somewhere in a monastery with no Wi-Fi, no salary, and no career ladder, a 35-year-old monk is developing a quality of mind so sharp, so focused, and so disciplined that it would embarrass most Ivy League alumni. That's not an insult to Harvard. That's an indictment of what we've all been taught focus actually is. Here's the problem. Every single productivity book, every attention span study, every self-help guru focuses on the same question. How do I get more done in less time? Wrong question. Completely wrong question. The monks never asked that question. The question they asked, the question that produced the results, is this. What is the quality of this one moment of attention? That is the entire difference. And by the end of this video, you'll never think about focus the same way again. I spent months going through neuroscience research, monastic training literature, Zen practice documentation, and cognitive science studies from MIT, Stanford, and Oxford. What I found destroyed almost everything I thought I knew about high performance. There are 5 things monks do that Harvard doesn't teach, and they're available to you right now for free. Chapter 1. The Myth of Multitasking. You think you can multitask? You can't. Nobody can. This is not a motivational statement. This is neuroscience. In 2009, Clifford Nass at Stanford University ran a study that shocked the research community. He expected to find that people who regularly multitask had developed superior attention management skills. They had not. They were worse, significantly worse, at everything. They were worse at filtering irrelevant information, worse at switching between tasks efficiently, worse at holding relevant information in working memory. The people who multitasked most were the worst at all 3 skills that multitasking supposedly requires. Here's why. Every time you switch attention from one task to another, your brain pays an attention residue tax, a concept identified by Sophie Leroy at the University of Minnesota. When you switch from writing an email to reading an article, part of your attention stays behind on the email. You're reading the article, but part of your processing power is still resolving the open loop you left in the email. The more switches you make, the higher the residue tax. The higher the tax, the less cognitive bandwidth you have for anything. The average knowledge worker switches tasks every 3 minutes and 5 seconds, according to Gloria Mark at UC Irvine. 3 minutes. Then they spend an average of 23 minutes recovering full focus. Do that math if you want to feel sick. Now here's what the monk does. The monk commits to one object of attention. One. Not because he has less to do, because he understands that the quality of focused attention is not linear, it is exponential. 5 hours of split attention produce less output than 1 hour of genuine single-pointed focus. The monk doesn't manage tasks, he manages the quality of his mind. One task, complete presence, until it's done. Then the next task. The Buddhist tradition calls this samadhi. Cognitive science calls it flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the Hungarian psychologist who spent decades studying peak performance, found that flow states, periods of complete absorption in a single task, are associated with the highest levels of productivity, creativity, and subjective satisfaction humans can experience. And yet almost nobody creates conditions for flow deliberately, because nobody taught them how. Here is the entry condition for flow that most people skip. You need a single, clear, moderately challenging objective. Not a vague intention, not a to-do list item. One sentence. What specific outcome am I producing in this exact session? Write it on a piece of paper before you open your laptop. The clarity of the objective is what gives the brain a target to lock onto. Without a target, your attention bounces. With a target, it hunts. But here's the thing though. Even if you establish single-task focus and write a clear objective, there's still a reason most people can't sustain attention for more than 8 minutes. And it's not the phone. It's not social media. It's something much older and much harder to fix. Chapter 2. The Untrained Default Mode. Your brain has 2 primary operating networks. The task-positive network activates when you're focused on an external goal, problem-solving, writing, analysis. The default mode network activates when you're not focused on anything in particular, daydreaming, mind-wandering, ruminating about the past, worrying about the future, mentally rehearsing conversations, narrating your own experience. Here is the problem. Most people's default mode network is hyperactive. It fires constantly, not just during breaks, during supposedly focused work sessions. You sit down to write, you write one paragraph, then your brain drifts. You're mentally replaying an argument from last week. You catch yourself, drag attention back, write 3 sentences, brain drifts again. You're planning what to cook for dinner. Back, write half a paragraph, brain drifts again. This cycle happens dozens of times an hour, and most people don't even notice it. They think they focused for an hour. They focused for about 8 to 12 minutes of real attention, spread across 60 minutes of clock time. Matthew Killingsworth at Harvard ran a study using an iPhone app that pinged 2,250 participants at random moments throughout their day and asked 2 questions. What are you doing right now? And are you thinking about what you're doing or something else? The results were striking. 47% of the time, people's minds were wandering. Not occasionally, nearly half the time. And here's the part that should disturb you. Mind wandering made people less happy, regardless of what they were mind wandering about. Even pleasant fantasies produced less happiness than full engagement with whatever they were currently doing. Monks trained the default mode network deliberately. For thousands of years before neuroscience gave it that name, monastic traditions understood that the untrained mind constantly wanders, and they built systematic protocols to address it. The tool they use is meditation, but not the version sold to you in wellness apps, the rigorous version. In Zen training, a monk sits in a posture that makes slouching uncomfortable. Discomfort is intentional. It creates a low-level physical signal that keeps the nervous system alert without triggering panic. The monk focuses on a single object, usually the breath. Every time the mind wanders, the monk notices, returns, no frustration, no judgment. Just noticing and returning. They do this for hours, every day, for years. Here's what the neuroscience shows is happening. Every time you notice the mind has wandered and redirect attention, you are strengthening the neural circuitry responsible for attentional control. The noticing and returning is the exercise, not the sustained focus. The practice of catching drift and coming back. Research from Sarah Lazar at Harvard Medical School showed that experienced meditators have measurably thicker cortical regions in areas associated with attention, interoception, and sensory processing. They literally built a different brain. Not through genetics, through daily practice. Your version does not require years in a monastery. Research from Amishi Jha at the University of Miami showed that 12 minutes of daily focused attention meditation, practiced consistently for 8 weeks, produced measurable improvements in attentional control in high-stress populations, including military personnel. 12 minutes, 8 weeks, measurable results. The tool is free. The only cost is that it's uncomfortable and boring, which is why most people quit in week 2. Don't quit. The discomfort is the training. The boredom is the workout. If you are not uncomfortable, you are not improving. Hit subscribe before your default mode network pulls you somewhere else. Chapter 3. Silence as a cognitive tool. The most striking thing about monastic environments is not the schedule. It's not the discipline. It's the silence. Monasteries are quiet in a way that most modern humans have never experienced. Not quiet like a library, quiet like nothing is happening. No background music, no ambient conversation, no traffic, no notifications, nothing. This sounds extreme. It is producing measurable neurological effects that researchers are only beginning to document. In 2013, Imke Kirsta at Duke University was studying the effects of sound on mouse brain tissue. She had 4 experimental conditions: music, white noise, environmental sounds, and silence. She expected silence to be a neutral baseline. It wasn't. Silence was the only condition that produced measurable neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, the region associated with memory, learning, and spatial navigation. The silence wasn't doing nothing. It was doing the most. The hypothesis Kirsty proposed was that silence creates processing space, that the brain, freed from the constant work of filtering incoming auditory information, could redirect resources toward consolidation, integration, and the formation of new neural connections. In other words, silence is not the absence of input, it is the presence of processing. This is why monks alternate periods of intense study with long periods of silence. They're not resting, they're consolidating. The learning stacks differently when it has space to integrate before new information arrives. The modern information diet, where new input is consumed almost continuously from waking to sleep, may be generating enormous amounts of shallow encoding while preventing the deep consolidation that silence enables. Here's what this means practically. After any significant learning session, 30 to 60 minutes of genuine silence is not wasted time. It is processing time. No podcasts, no music, no background TV. Silence. Walk if you want, sit if you want, but let the brain do the invisible work it does when you stop filling it with noise. And if you think you can't do silence for 30 minutes without going insane, that restlessness you feel, that urge to immediately fill the silence with something, that is the symptom of an overstimulated attention system. The restlessness is telling you exactly how badly you need the silence. But here's the deeper problem though. Silence and attentional training solve the input and processing side. But most high performers still have one massive hidden weakness that undermines everything else. And the monks have a direct fix for it. Chapter 4: Beginner's Mind. In Zen Buddhism, there is a concept called Shoshin, beginner's mind. The idea is simple and devastating. An expert mind has few possibilities. A beginner's mind has many. The more you know about a subject, the more your existing knowledge filters and constrains your ability to see what's actually there. Cognitive scientists call this the curse of knowledge. Once you know something, it is nearly impossible to accurately remember or simulate what it was like to not know it. This has a subtle but profound effect on how experts learn. The expert encounters new information and immediately filters it through existing frameworks. If the new information fits the framework, it's accepted and assimilated quickly. If it contradicts the framework, it's unconsciously resisted, minimized, or explained away. This is not laziness or arrogance. It is the automatic operation of well-established neural pathways doing exactly what they were trained to do. The problem is that when you're trying to learn something genuinely new, those well-established pathways become obstacles. Research from Erickson's expertise studies, and confirmed by scholars like Roger Kneebone at Imperial College London, shows that experts routinely make systematic errors precisely in the areas of their highest confidence. They stop checking assumptions they've stopped questioning. They stop attending to signals that contradict what they already know. Monks counter this with a deliberate practice of epistemic humility. Every day they return to foundational texts, not because they've forgotten them, but because the practice of approaching a familiar text as if reading it for the first time forces the brain to generate new pathways around the existing ones. They're training the ability to see freshly. Your version of this is simpler and more immediately useful. Before any learning session, write down 3 things you think you already know about this topic. Then, as you learn, specifically look for evidence that you were wrong, not broadly, specifically. Hunt for the places your existing knowledge was incomplete, oversimplified, or just wrong. Your brain will not do this automatically. It will try to confirm what it already knows. You have to force the hunting. This technique, called assumption auditing, is one of the most powerful upgrades to any learning practice. The students who improve fastest are not the ones who absorb information most efficiently. They are the ones who are most willing to discover that their current understanding is incorrect. Most people find being wrong uncomfortable. Expert learners find being wrong productive. The monks built the love of being wrong into their daily practice. You can too. Chapter 5: The Long Game. Here is the final difference between the monk and the Harvard graduate, and it is the one that matters most. The Harvard graduate is optimizing for the next 4 years. GPA, internships, entry-level offers. The monk is optimizing for the next 40 years. Not because the monk doesn't care about the short term, because the monk understands something about compounding that most people intellectually understand, but almost nobody applies. Warren Buffett has talked about this in relation to investing. Compounding is the most powerful force in building wealth. A 10% annual return sounds small. Over 40 years, it's transformative. The same principle applies with brutal precision to cognitive development. Small daily improvements in learning quality compound into massive long-term differences in capability. A 1% daily improvement in attentional quality. A 1% daily increase in depth of understanding. A 1% daily reduction in the default mode network's hijacking of your cognitive bandwidth. None of these feels significant in a day. In a year, they feel significant. In a decade, they are transformative. The monk doesn't study in bursts of inspiration. The monk studies on a schedule that does not depend on inspiration. Rain or shine, interested or bored, high energy or fatigued. The practice happens. This is what creates the compounding. Not the individual session, the consistency of the system. B.J. Fogg at Stanford spent decades studying behavior change, and his findings converge on one thing. Consistency beats intensity every time. A 10-minute daily practice maintained for 2 years produces more cognitive development than a 10-hour weekly session that burns out in 3 months. Your brain develops through daily repetition of focused effort, not through occasional heroic sessions. The monk doesn't have heroic sessions. The monk has a practice. And the practice has been running every day for years. That's the secret, not the method. The relentlessness of the method is applied consistently. Here is the complete framework. 1. Eliminate multitasking. One task with a single clear outcome is stated before you begin, every time, no exceptions. 2. Train your default mode network. 12 minutes of focused attention practice daily. The noticing and returning is the exercise. The discomfort is the workout. 3. Use silence as a cognitive tool. After every significant learning block, 30 to 60 minutes of genuine silence. No input. Let the brain consolidate. 4. Practice beginner's mind. Before every session, write 3 things you think you know. Then specifically hunt for where you're wrong. Force the brain to update, not just confirm. 5. Play the long game. Small, consistent daily practice. Run it as a system. Don't depend on motivation. The system runs whether you feel like it or not. The monks didn't discover these principles by accident. They discovered them by taking human attention more seriously than almost any other tradition in history. They devoted entire civilizations to answering one question. What is a human mind capable of if it is properly trained? The answer is a lot more than most people ever experience. And here's the truth about why this matters beyond productivity. When your mind is trained, you experience your life differently. You are more present with the people you care about. You are more creative. You are more capable of the kind of deep thinking that produces genuinely new ideas, rather than rehashed versions of things you've already encountered. A trained mind doesn't just perform better, it lives better. That is what the monks understood, and what the relentless optimization culture of most universities never quite gets around to teaching. You can be incredibly productive and completely miserable. Or you can build a mind that is focused, present, and genuinely capable. The second path is longer and harder. It is also the only one worth taking. If this video shifted something for you, I want to ask you one genuine thing. Subscribe. Not because it helps the algorithm, though it does, but because this channel is built for people who take their minds seriously. Every video is a new system, a new framework, a new set of research-backed tools for becoming someone who thinks and learns at a level most people never reach. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you there.